It's a great honor. Every time I come to Korea, I get experiences that I've never gotten anywhere else in the world. And I find it to be a tremendous honor every time I get to share ideas with the great people of Korea here. There's a paper that I wrote not too long ago, and this is the most popular paper I've written. And the title of the paper is 10 Unanswerable Questions That Neither Science Nor Religion Can Answer. So I thought I would share some of these ideas with you as a way of kind of stretching your imagination and setting the stage for a few other topics that we're going to get into. So the first question I ask is this question of, why are there exceptions to every rule? I had somebody write in and argue with me on this topic, and they said the fact that you've made a statement that there are exceptions to every rule is itself a rule that there's no exceptions to. But from my standpoint, it's actually the exception to all of the other rules. The second one is, why do logic and reason fail to explain that which is true? The third one, is the universe finite or infinite? What happens when we get to the edge of the universe? The fourth one, why does anything exist? Number 5, why does time exist? Number 6, why do humans matter? Number 7, why are humans so fallible? Number 8, do human accomplishments have long-term meaning? Number 9, why is the future unknowable? And the last one is, what is the purpose of death? Now, I start off with questions like this as a way of kind of stretching your thinking, because being a futurist is as much being a philosopher as it is being somebody who thinks and talks about the future. See, we're a very backward-looking society. We're backward-looking because it's just human nature. We've all personally experienced the past. As we look around us, we see evidence of the past all around us. All information that we come into contact with is essentially history. So the past is very knowable. At the same time, we're going to be spending the rest of our lives in the future. So it's almost as if we're walking backwards into the future. So my job as a futurist is to help turn people around, to give them some idea of what the future might hold. So how does the future get created? Well, the future gets created in the minds of everybody around us. We all participate in creating the future. Certainly some of us have more influence than others. But people make decisions today based on their understanding of what the future holds. So I use this phrase a lot: the future creates the present. Now, this is just the opposite of what most people think. Most people think that what we're doing today is going to create the future, but from a little different perspective, it's these images that we hold in our head determine our actions today. So here's the key thing. If we change somebody's vision of the future, we change the way they start making decisions today. My goal is, by the time you finish watching this show, that I will change your vision of the future and you will make different decisions as a result of that. Let me switch gears here. I'm going to talk a little bit about an emerging technology called atmospheric water harvesters. For whatever reason, only of all the water on the surface of the earth, only about 2% of it is fresh water. And out of that, only about 25% of that is accessible to human beings. So the entire human race until now has survived on 1/2% of all the water on planet Earth. Atmospheric water harvesters are a technology for sucking moisture out of the air and providing fresh water to people anywhere on the planet. What I have on the screen here now is what's called a fog net that sucks moisture out of the air. This is an MIT project in Peru doing basically the same thing. A French designer came up with this design for something called the Worka water towers. This system will take about 100 liters a day out of the air, and it has changed the lives of lots of young ladies in Africa because they're the ones that have to haul all the water for the villages. They've even taught the villages how to take a 4-person team and build these themselves in about a week. Another French company has figured out how to use windmills to suck moisture out of the air. These windmills are being tested out in Abu Dhabi, and they're able to get around 500 liters a day, depending on the humidity, to provide fresh water in that country. A young inventor came up with this system. It's a solar-powered system called AirDrop, which sucks moisture out of the air and irrigates all the plants nearby. Now, the whole time people were working on this technology, the holy grail was for somebody to actually develop a self-filling water bottle. A few months ago, a company called Fontis developed this prototype for a self-filling water bottle that fits on a bicycle. And as you ride along, it fills up the water bottle. Let me show you a short video on how this works.
This is a water bottle that fills itself. It's called the Fontis, and it's supposed to be able to pull water out of the air as you ride a bike, filling up over the course of an hour. Fresh water is something we constantly take for granted. Of the over 7 billion people on Earth, 783 million don't have access to clean water. Even in the United States, areas like Flint, Michigan are struggling with water contamination. It's hoped that designs like the Fontis can, in some small way, help to combat these statistics. But pulling water out of the air is a slow process. The Fontis prototype produces about 17 ounces of water an hour. That's great for cyclists, but it's not going to solve a water crisis. The bottle's prototype doesn't filter out air pollution either, and that's something it'll need to do to truly provide access to clean water. Still, it's a starting point.
This is an example of a future technology that's going to change the world in lots of different ways. As the science fiction writer William Gibson says, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. Now, what I've just shown you is an example of what I call a catalytic innovation. This is different than a disruptive innovation that disrupts existing industries. The catalytic innovations create entire new industries. Some examples of catalytic innovation in the past were things like electricity, automobiles, airplanes, telephones, photographs. All of these went on to create multi-billion-dollar industries. So here's the important thing. All industries are a bell curve. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And yes, all industries end. All the major industries we have today will be gone 1,000 years from now. The other important thing is that the most profitable industries today all tend to be in the second half of the bell curve. They're constantly having to do more with less. I'll give you an example of this. In the steel industry, projections are that we'll reach the peak demand for steel in the world around 2024. At this point, we will develop synthetic materials that can be used in place of steel, and the overall demand for steel will start to decline. There's a parallel bell curve of the employment in an industry, and the peak employment in the steel industry actually happened in the 1980s. At that point, we actually, in the United States, we had 3 times as many people working in the steel industry as we do today, but we're still producing far more steel. So the peak employment in an industry is actually a lead indicator as somewhere in the future, the overall demand for that goods or service will start to decline. So for the industries out here today, are the industries that you're working in, are they at the end of the bell curve, or are they at the beginning of a new bell curve? A few months back, I made the prediction that by 2030, over 2 billion jobs are going to disappear. Now, when I made this prediction, it wasn't intended to be a doom or gloom statement. I wasn't telling the world that we were going to have 2 billion people unemployed. Rather, that this is going to force us to create new systems for creating new jobs at a faster rate than ever before. This is intended to be a wake-up call that we need to be doing a lot more for creating these new systems for reskilling people and preparing them for the future. This is not just the low-level jobs. Companies like Uber and Airbnb have actually figured out how to use software to automate out middle management jobs out of existence. Every year, I go to the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. It's a big event where they have all of the new products that are being rolled out in the consumer electronics industry. I have a friend of mine who comes back from that show every year, and he always says the same thing. He says, yeah, but there was nothing new, which means that he didn't see anything all that exciting. The products were just a little bit better than the year before. In a lot of ways, he's true. That's a true statement, because the thousands of televisions that they have there, every year they're a little bit flatter, they're a little bit bigger, a little bit more curved. They have more downloadable apps, better battery life, a little bit brighter. All of them have changed just a little bit, but not a lot. When you look at televisions from one year to the next, you don't see much change. But if you would compare today's televisions to the ones 15 years ago, you would notice a huge change. For this reason, I talk about the essential role of the iterators being more valuable than the innovators.